Sincero.
Buenos días, buenas tardes a
Good
todos y
morning,
todas.
good afternoon,
Antes de
everybody.
comenzar, quisiera
Before getting
recordarles
started, let
que
me
contamos con
remind
el
you
servicio de
that we have
interpretación, por lo que
simultaneous
podrán
translation,
seleccionar su idioma
so
de
you can
preferencia
select the language
haciendo
of your
clic en
choice
el
by
icono
clicking
con
on
forma de
the
mundo
globe
en la barra que
icon
figura debajo.
at the bottom of
Good
the
morning,
screen.
good afternoon. First of all, I would like to remind you that we are providing simultaneous interpretation, so you can select your language by entering in the globe icon in the toolbar below. Thank you. Ahora sí, para dar comienzo, quisiera en nombre de la Presidencia de la Red de Consumo Seguro y Salud y de la Subsecretaría de Acciones para la Defensa de las y los Consumidores de Argentina, darles la bienvenida a este webinar sobre la seguridad de las baterías en las Américas, organizado junto a los colegas de TIC Council.
Recording in progress.
Perdón. Las pilas se encuentran en numerosos productos del hogar que facilitan la vida diaria de las y los consumidores, desde controles remotos, juguetes, relojes, etc. Pero somos realmente conscientes de los peligros que pueden representar, ya sea por su composición química como por su diseño, tamaño y forma. Las baterías pueden implicar un grave riesgo y tener un impacto negativo en la salud de los consumidores. Por ello, desde la presidencia de la red, creemos que es fundamental promover desde nuestras agencias acciones que permitan alertar e informar sobre los riesgos que conllevan y su uso seguro. En este sentido, hemos generado recientemente una campaña en redes sociales, tanto de la red como propias de los distintos estados, a fin de sensibilizar a las y los consumidores. Asimismo, consideramos oportuno generar espacios como este para intercambiar ideas y buenas prácticas en materia de políticas desarrolladas para abordar el tema. Hoy haremos foco en uno de los aspectos vinculados a las baterías, que es la seguridad. Antes de comenzar el debate, quisiera agradecer a los expertos del TIC Council por compartir esta iniciativa junto a la red, a las autoridades que participan en el panel y a la Secretaría Técnica por el apoyo en la organización del evento, así como a todos aquellos que han destinado un tiempo en sus agendas para acompañarnos hoy. Ahora sí, quisiera presentar al señor Benjamin Johnson, quien moderará el primer panel del día de hoy sobre tipos de pilas y riesgos asociados. Ben es analista de políticas de TIC Council Américas, donde gestiona las relaciones con las autoridades nacionales de Norteamérica y Sudamérica. En este puesto, también realiza investigaciones sobre diversos temas, desde la verificación de la cadena de suministro sostenible y la seguridad de los productos, hasta proyectos de infraestructura de calidad. Antes de incorporarse al TIC Council, fue investigador principal sobre África Oriental para Ballard Frontier Solutions y cursó un máster en Derecho y Diplomacia en la Fletcher School. Ben, tenés la palabra. Gracias.
Thank you. Attendees, welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Ben Johnson, as she mentioned, here on behalf of the TIC Council, a global trade federation representing independent third-party testing, inspection, and certification industry, whose members assure not only that regulatory requirements are met, but also that reliability, economic value, and sustainability are enhanced. Our presenter for this session will be discussing battery types and their associated risks. To those present, I encourage you to submit your questions as we proceed. And if we have time, I'll try to address them at the end of our session. As you all know, batteries are playing an ever-growing role in not only stationary power storage and transportation, but also an array of consumer items. However, safety concerns are also growing. In the US, we've seen a number of legislative and regulatory actions. In 2022, the US Congress passed Reese's Law, aiming to protect children from button cell batteries. And this year, New York City passed a new rule following a series of fires caused by lithium-ion batteries. Meanwhile, Congress, as well as the Consumer Product Safety Commission, are debating additional safety regulations. To discuss these safety concerns, I welcome Darren Conlon, the Senior Consumer Product engineer for our member, UL Solutions. With over 3 decades of experience at UL, doing testing, evaluating, certifying, and developing requirements for an array of standards, he has a wealth of knowledge on this topic. And without further ado, I welcome Mr. Conlon to begin the presentation.
On the prevalence and popularity of the lithium-ion batteries in consumer products. And this was drawn out by constant consumer demand for smaller and longer lasting batteries, which led to newer designs and to improve energy density, speed up the charging. But when that happens, the risks are elevated. So we look at lithium-ion battery systems as the charger, the battery management system, and then the load, or in this case, the consumer product, the rechargeable battery-powered consumer product that uses the batteries, lithium-ion batteries. And we would say that system itself that I just mentioned, all those devices and components, they should be coordinated for safety, and and not really reliant upon commercial off-the-shelf drop-ins like an 18650 battery, the long cylindrical types that you can get on retail websites. But really have the system coordinated for safety. Lithium-ion batteries are the most energy-dense rechargeable battery technologies currently considered appropriate for broad consumer and commercial applications. Lithium batteries generally have low failure rates, less than 1 in 10 to 12 million cells, but they do use flammable electrolytes, and defective batteries can have a much higher failure rate. As Ben mentioned before, there's been some highly publicized incidents and actually recalls. Ben mentioned New York City with the e-bikes and the amount of fires in New York City, as well as in London and other places around the world where lithium-ion batteries are used in consumer products. And some of you may remember back in 2015-16, the hoverboard incidents that resulted in the development of the UL standard and CPSC action mandating third-party certification for hoverboards. And Ben also mentioned, the CPSC action around the coin cell and the, button batteries. These involve ingestion hazards for children. And, if a child ingests these batteries, I'm sorry, I'm just changing my screen over, and this just messed me up. Sorry, guys. Let's go. There we go. Sorry about that. So ingestion hazards for children, if they swallow one of these coin cell or button batteries, it's not only a serious hazard, but it can lead to death, and that's what prompted Reese's Law, back in 2022. And just more recently, in September of last month, the CPSC voted to approve a mandatory standard to reduce the button cell and coin battery ingestion hazards to children 6 years and younger. There's a UL standard, UL 4200A, that the CPSC has agreed that covers, the Reese's Law. So this is a mandatory standard that'll be taken into effect in the next few months. One of the prevalent hazards, and I mentioned the e-bikes and hoverboards and other consumer type products. These are related to thermal runaway. Batteries can be very vulnerable to thermal runaway, which is a self-perpetuating phenomena where the electrochemical performance cannot be controlled. Thermal runaway can lead to fires and explosions and can induce cascading thermal runaway in other batteries or battery units. Thermal runaway can be caused by a number of causes, including manufacturing defects, physical abuse, environmental stresses, and inadequate battery management in operation. Here's an example of what could happen related to cell failures. What's the potential causes? And if you look under the causes, that leftmost column, it could be an external short circuit, internal short circuit, could be an overcharge situation, an over discharge, external heating, overheating, self-heating, and that will result in an elevated temperature. Then if you go to the right from elevated temperature, you'll see that there's a generation of heat and gas. And to the left column, the one that's in green, if you got heat dissipation that's greater than the heat being generated, you'll have a safe outcome. If you have the opposite, where you have the heat dissipation is less than heat generation, then you'll have thermal runaway, and there could be venting of gases, there could be a fire and explosion. One thing to note on thermal runaway hazards, I talked about some of the causes, but also, in the marketplace, there are counterfeit or low quality batteries, and sometimes these counterfeit or low quality batteries, they lack the protective safeguards needed to mitigate the risk of thermal runaway hazards. Sometimes these counterfeit or low quality batteries, they may not have the overcurrent or over temperature protective devices, or even a robust battery management system to reduce this risk. And there's been studies on counterfeit batteries and hazards, and you can find those online. There's a few of those research studies. I do have two videos that I'll show you. Both of these were conducted in the UL Solutions Lab. This is a hoverboard. These are 18650 batteries in the hoverboard, and thermal runaway was induced by heating an individual cell within the battery pack. And you can see smoke and off-gassing. You'll see some fires happening, ongoing explosions as the thermal runaway expands to other cells. So we heated one cell purposely, and you can see the result. And this is an example of thermal runaway in a consumer product, in this case, a hoverboard. A little more different here, we have an energy storage system, which will become more and more prevalent, especially associated with solar power. And so this is the energy storage system. Some of these could be in a residence, smaller ones, but still, similarly, we simulated an energy storage system thermal runaway by heating an individual cell. And I'm going to speed this up to get to, we'll see some action. You'll see some smoking, and then you'll see fire very soon based on the thermal runaway. Again, this was developed by just overheating one cell in the energy storage system. And you can see the fire moving upwards and to the walls. So the risks of lithium-ion batteries, especially when something goes wrong, is pretty high. Then, if you consider like the global battery deployment of batteries kind of smaller and more powerful, more energy dense, more common, more global, it all means there's increased risk as rapid battery product introductions occur on a global scale. The supply chains for the battery materials, the batteries, protective software, and battery system components are not only global, but they're increasingly complex. And then, in order to prevent these cascading risks and the magnitude of the risks, these battery risks must be understood and proactively mitigated through systematic and comprehensive physical and software assessments. And so, to mitigate these risks and provide a higher level of safety, battery-powered appliances should be evaluated to the relevant safety standards and undergo a robust functional safety evaluation. Evaluation of the entire battery system, which again is the battery cell, the charger, the end-use appliance, and interfaces between them, with a particular focus on the lithium-ion cells not experiencing conditions outside of their specified operating regions for charging. And then as part of that functional safety evaluation, the battery management system should be evaluated for its ability to maintain the cells, the battery cells, within their normal operating parameters for voltage, temperature, and current, both during charging conditions and discharging conditions. And this robust functional safety evaluation of the battery management system also makes sure that if those parameters, those operating conditions for the battery are exceeded, that there are protective functions, protective devices that function to limit or shut down the charging or the discharging functions to prevent further excursions and beyond normal operating conditions, which will definitely decrease the risk of thermal runaway. And then definitely want to emphasize to leverage testing, inspection, certification. Safer batteries and battery operated products are critical to leverage testing, inspection, and certification. Standards capture the expert communities in the standards. This is the technical committees. These technical committees typically have the best understanding of risk and how to mitigate those risks. And using standards is the absolute best practice for safety. When you think about testing, inspection, and certification, effective testing regimes using these standard protocols establish confidence in the battery safety performance and suitable integration of that battery in the consumer product application. And then inspection and surveillance programs support appropriate and reliable production programs. It helps to ensure that the product tested is the same as the product that's being produced or manufactured. And then from the certification point of view, certification demonstrates ongoing commitment to safety through compliance with the accepted safety requirements. Again, this would be the safety standards within a particular safety scheme. I think that's it. I do want to again emphasize, evaluating battery-powered consumer products, evaluating the entire system, the battery, the charger, the end product, and the battery management system. This will help definitely mitigate the risk of thermal runaway when consumers use these lithium-ion powered products. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Darren. We have a few follow-up questions if you have the time.
Sure.
So one of the main things that got brought up earlier in our conversation, as well as been brought up quite popularly, is the idea of an e-handshake, that ability for the battery and whatever charging unit, as well as other components, to be able to recognize each other. Could you explain that and how that might be a better preventative choice as opposed to using, let's say, a timer hooked up to your charging unit?
Definitely. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for that. I did forget to bring that up, but it's the communications between what Ben is calling electronic handshake, and sometimes that's what it's referred to. But there are communications when you have a properly designed product that's battery powered, rechargeable. It's the battery communicates with the battery charger, which in some cases will also communicate with the end product. But typically the battery management system, which manages that communication, that electronic handshake, ideally, if you've got a product and the battery, is connected to a charger that was not intended to be connected, there should be electronic communications or electronic handshake to make sure that that battery is not being charged by a charging unit that was not intended to be charging that battery. So we look to make sure that the battery, the charger, and the product, there's a correlation between them, and there's that electronic communication. So ideally, if that system is not connected as intended, if the correct charger is not being used, the correct battery is not being used, then nothing functions. So we want to make sure and we evaluate that system. And then the other thing, we have a physical handshake, if I call it that, is using proprietary connectors. So manufacturers would use a connector connecting the battery to the charger base, so that you just can't put any battery in there. You can only fit the battery that's intended for that charger as well as for the end product. So electronic handshake and then the physical, mechanical handshake, if I put it that way.
Thank you. And I guess another follow-up question. You mentioned quickly some of the perils of counterfeit batteries and how there seems to be an increase or proliferation in counterfeit batteries in several markets. What are some of the difficulties when it comes to identifying and being able to verify these counterfeit batteries? Because they seem to be increasingly more convincing on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the research that I've seen online on this note is, first of all, counterfeit is a pretty, I'll use the word slick, right? They try to copy as much as they can on the outside, right? So they want to make sure, they'll counterfeit what the label's supposed to look like. Sometimes they'll counterfeit the certification mark. But some things you can see is that, if counterfeit batteries are typically, not always, typically much less expensive than the battery that that the real manufacturer made, right? So if you try to get a relatively inexpensive battery and it's really, the price is a lot less than the manufacturer's battery, then you'll say, okay, that's a clue that's likely a counterfeit battery. Sometimes that's one thing, and sometimes without opening it, the battery, the consumer will never know that they got a counterfeit battery. So I think the consumer's got to do a little more research before they purchase a cheap battery, a battery that has a promise of, I can get this much more quicker in my house. And even looking at the end product manufacturer's website to see if there's any warnings about, counterfeit products that are out there.
And I think we got time for maybe one more question. I guess when we look forward to ideas of new chemistries, whether it's solid state or salt-based batteries, what are some of the challenges you see coming forward when it comes to addressing safety for consumers on those fronts?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is making sure that we've done enough research. We as the collective, not just UL Solutions, but we, have done enough research to make sure that that battery is not introducing new risks, right? And so, and the risks, when we have a thermal runaway, for instance, even with lithium-ion batteries, if you look at the electric vehicles, right? And even with the e-bikes, when you've got a chemistry, that's that has that much energy, you want to be sure that if something goes wrong, the fire service community can actually deal with that in a good manner. Right now, there's some difficulties with putting out the fires for these e-bikes and electrical vehicles. And so the research on the new chemistries should include, if something goes wrong, is it easy to put out that fire? So, yeah, that's what I think, Ben.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we can speak far more about that. There's quite a few issues, as well as going into some of the aspects of disposal and sustainability. However, I want to leave some time for our next panel. So I'm going to kick it over to Maria Paula to continue with that panel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ben. Take care, everyone.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Benjamin.
Thank
Muchas
you,
gracias al
Benjamin,
señor
and
Larrincón
thank
por
you
tan detallada información.
for your
Seguro como
presentation
autoridades
and the
de protección al
information.
consumidor
As consumer
estaremos
authority,
atentos
we're going to
a
keep our
tomar
eyes
medidas
open
sobre
to
las
taking
baterías y también
measures
es
on
muy
batteries,
importante
and
mantener
it's
a
very
los
important
consumidores
to keep
informados sobre
consumers
este
informed
tema para que tomen
on
decisiones
this
seguras.
topic so that they can make
Continuando
safe
con el segundo
decisions.
panel,
Continuing on with the second panel,
quisiera presentar a las
I'd
autoridades
like
que
to
nos van a
introduce
acompañar.
the
Este
authorities
panel
that
pone
will
foco
be
en las
with us,
medidas
and this panel
gubernamentales
focuses on
abordadas,
governmental measures
adoptadas para proteger a las y
adopted
los consumidores de
to
los riesgos de
protect
las
consumers
baterías.
from battery
Nos
risks.
acompaña hoy la
We have
señora
here
Daniela Parragüero,
Daniela
jefa
Parra,
del Departamento de
head
Estudios e Información, jefa de
the
Unidad de
Department of
Seguridad y
Studies
Sustentabilidad
and
en el Consumo,
Intelligence,
con 11 años de experiencia en el
with
Servicio
11 years
Nacional del
experience in
Consumidor
the
CERNAC,
National Consumer Service,
participando desde el
CERNAC,
año 2013 en diversas
since
instancias de trabajo a nivel
2013, in
internacional
doing
en
this work
materia de seguridad de
internationally as
productos
well,
y
in terms of
presidiendo la
product
Mesa
safety
Nacional de Seguridad de
and
Productos
in the
en Chile.
national
Es administradora pública,
coordination
licenciada en
of
Ciencias
product
Políticas
safety in
y
Chile.
Gubernamentales
She
de la
has
Universidad
a
de Chile,
degree from the University
magíster en
of Chile,
Ingeniería
MA
Industrial,
in
diplomada en
Industrial
Técnicas para la
Engineer,
Vigilancia de la
and a
Seguridad de los
diploma
Productos
in
en los Mercados,
product
diplomada
surveillance
en
in market,
Regulación y
and
Competencia.
a
Daniela,
degree
te
in
paso la
regulation
palabra.
and competence. Daniela, you have the floor. Thank you, Paula, and it's very nice to be here. Let me share the screen so that we don't have any connection issues. Can you confirm if you can see my presentation? Okay, so let me mention, I'd like to thank the Minister of Environment that provided certain information regarding what they're doing in the country regarding lithium batteries. The first scope I'd like to say is that in Chile and some countries in South America, we make a distinction using different words when we talk about batteries. Unlike English, that everything is batteries. We use two words, one that is batteries and the other one pilas. Pilas normally,
Disculpa,
when they're
Daniela, que te
smaller in
interrumpa.
size.
Si podrías encender tu cámara.
Can you please turn your camera on? Okay.
Gracias, perdón.
I had turned it off because of connection issues. So the first thing, we make a difference in the names that we use to define battery types. We use two main types. One is pilas, the word that we use in Spanish, that are smaller, and before they were the disposable pilas. And we also talk about batteries, the ones that are bigger. This started to become relevant in the country because we have lots of electronic equipment and home appliances and cell phones that use this type of energy. And some information that we have for some years ago, there were around 24 million mobile devices. So they doubled our population, practically speaking. There were 2 cell phones per person. So this is a topic that began to be of interest. We can talk about batteries from different dimensions. One, and which is what has us here, which is product security and safety. And this is in the Consumer Act, in the consumption of goods and services and the environment. And we can also look at this from a commercial perspective, considering that Chile is one of the largest lithium producers globally. It's the raw material used to do the batteries we're talking about today. We also have the environmental factors, given the obsolescence globally for devices that generate excess disposal and therefore an effect on the environment. And then from the legal standpoint, that has to do with the regulatory measures that we've been adopting as a country to face these changes. So regarding safety in lithium batteries, years ago, you may remember some recalls that were iconic, such as Samsung Galaxy Note 7, that there were some explosions from these cell phones and they were even banned at airports. In parallel, we also had some cases of ignition of hummingbirds in other countries. So we said there are many of these products that are entering our country and we're unaware what's happening in Chile with these products. That's why, and given the absence of regulation we had at this moment, we decided to carry out a study on product safety. And based on this report, the following year, we did a diagnostic study on the safety of cell phones with the purpose of identifying the main problems that were happening at the level of consumers with these devices. By looking at the topic in general with lithium batteries, we were able to confirm obsolescence and the complaints we got, the amount of waste generated in the country because of these products, and the lack of technological structure to recycle these products. And with all of the consequences it brings about, the pollutants that can derive in different risks for the environment, as well as for people, the level of toxicity we can see with these products, and the flammability risk. We went over certain cases, and we can see some of the cases that happened in China, Honduras, US, Pakistan, and the cases that begin to happen in our country regarding burns and overheating of different products, that all of them used a common element of lithium batteries. As a result of this, we did a product safety study on cell phones as a result of the complaints we received for cell phones. And from 40,000 cases, we went through 17,000 had a specific relationship with product safety. And from them, we see almost 2,000 cases that we feel had the biggest health risk and product safety, which is the chart you see on screen that indicates over 1,000 cases had to do with overheating. We also related this to the different cell phone brands, and therefore we were able to contact the companies to see what was happening with their products at that time. After this, some other actions we have had as a country in terms of recalls, and there's some examples of recalls throughout the various years, mainly related to notebook batteries and similar products that have had a recall for different computer brands. This is a quick overview of what we've done regarding product safety. On the other hand, and in regards to environment, in Chile, since 2016, we have Act 20,920 called REP, Extended Producer Liability, which defines as priority products for recycling, packaging, tires, oil lubricants, including batteries and electric and electronic devices. And in line with these products, it promotes the regulation that is necessary to enhance design, eco-design, the labeling of these priority products, and it provides certain obligations for suppliers and consumers. For suppliers, some of the records required are to keep a public registration of the manufacturers, to finance the valuation of the waste, in other words, that can fund the collection and recycling of the waste generated from these products, to guarantee the treatment of the waste, and to meet certain collection standards. Regarding consumers, the law mandates all consumers to take these the waste to management systems so that they can be recycled and treated. And waste management in general. As I mentioned before, every product has a supreme decree that set the collection goals and valuation of every one of the products that will gradually increase in time. At present, we're working on the one that regulates pilas, which would be batteries that weight less than 2 kilos And batteries are the ones heavier than 2 kilos. And we're reviewing this definition. And then sometime later this year, there's going to be a specific decree that will deal with batteries, because several different technologies and products associated to this use are coming. Both the acid lead and lithium ion that are used for electromobility. And yesterday, a fair was inaugurated of electromobility for the second consecutive year, in which all of the innovative technologies in electromobility are brought, and that includes automobiles, city car, trucks, and bicycles, scooters, and other products like this. So it's a market that's expanding very quickly, and we need to work on this. Having all of this in mind, we need to think what we should do. This is a very early topic that is not developed in Latin America, mostly in our case, but we have areas we need to work on. One is production management at a national level, because we're lithium producers, and the president provided a national strategy of lithium that includes different areas. We also need to continue looking at the environment projection in terms of how it impacts the ecosystem and how we're meeting our goals. And most importantly, what Darren mentioned as well, is how we manage product safety by establishing standards that are used as parameters to measure the level of safety for all these products. Some of the details we can suggest to begin working on this is to include use and care instructions in the product label, that not all products have it today, and to work with the industry in research, design, and development of products. They're manufacturing, because we have the duty to innovate, but also to safeguard the health and security of all consumers. That's the mission we have. This is what I had for you today.
Muchísimas gracias, Daniela, por compartir estas iniciativas y las políticas adoptadas por CERNAC. Muy interesante. Pasamos ahora al siguiente panelista, que es el señor Andrés Prada García, por la Superintendencia de Industria y Comercio de Colombia. Andrés es diseñador industrial, estuvo participando de un proyecto de investigación relacionado con el diseño de sistemas para disminuir lesiones de tórax y abdomen en accidentes de motos, y en el año 2015 fue panelista en el Congreso de Seguridad de Productos de Vehículos Automotores. Ha trabajado en el sector automotor en el área de capacitaciones y cuenta con 8 años de experiencia dentro del Grupo de Seguridad de Productos de la Superintendencia de Industria y Comercio. Sus estudios más recientes son el uso de cajas negras o EDR en estudios de accidentes y fraudes de seguros con Crash Data Group. En su tiempo libre escribe reviews sobre vehículos enfocados a la seguridad, además de programar carros para simuladores de carreras. Así que Andrés, te paso la palabra.
Race cars. Thank you, Paola. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to begin this presentation by showing what happens when someone ingests a lithium battery, one of the small ones, like the coin batteries, the button batteries. And we're going to focus this presentation to these lithium batteries. Although we have safety campaigns, recalls regarding lithium batteries and many products, we're going to be focusing on the small batteries today. Let me share my screen. Let's watch this video in which we can see the risks and the injury mechanism of a small lithium battery just 2 hours after ingesting it. So the battery comes through the mouth to the esophagus, and we can see the damage that is created because of the accumulation of ions. It causes necrosis. The positive end of the battery creates an acid environment, and we can see necrosis here after 8 hours. In this regard, what happens with these small batteries, it's that on the negative end, there's an alkaline environment that injures the tissue where the battery is located. Normally, the child swallows the battery, it gets stuck in the esophagus, and this injures the child in less than 2 hours. That can provoke a rupture of the esophagus or blood vessels that may end in a hemorrhage and the death of the child. Although we've also seen cases of adults. So what did we do in Colombia within the powers that we have? We have an administrative order, and let me share very quickly what we did. Kids have a natural tendency to take objects to their mouth. Those of you that have had kids, you can see that they take everything to their mouth. For them, a battery, it's a very appealing, bright object, and then they put it in their mouths. We need to be aware that they're vulnerable, and kids have a hard time acknowledging hazards. Kids don't have the capacity to react as we would do. And what's safe for a child cannot be for an adult and the other way around. So what did the superintendency did to limit these accidents with the small batteries that we can find in several toys, remote controls, vehicles, thermometers, scales? And although there's a regulation for toys in Colombia, the toys coming in the country or produced in the country have to follow certain specs. But there was nothing related with the protection of kids' access to these batteries. So we had to formulate a manufacturing criteria to tell manufacturers how they had to design their toys, but we didn't want to do that. But we wanted to get rid of this risk. So these small lithium ion batteries that are so hazardous and are found in toys, we had to restrict access to them. Through this QR code, you can have access to our portal where you can download this. Basically, to ban production, distribution, and sale of toys that don't have a safety system that restricts ease of access to batteries. If we restrict access to batteries, if the kid can easily take the battery out and swallow the battery, we would have an accident hazard here. So what did we do here? Whose mechanism of energy transmission, which is where the batteries are stored, can have an adjustment that prevents it to open easily. maybe that we have to use a tool or make opening it difficult. So if the battery compartment has a screw, for instance, I need a screwdriver to open it. Kids will have a hard time to look for a screwdriver, take the screw out and have access to the battery. Or when there are products that by only lifting the lid, you can have access to the batteries. But in others, I need to do 2 movements, like opening 2 tabs at the time, making it difficult for kids to have access to the batteries that are risky for them. So what else have we done? We've also surveilled the market. We've carried out campaigns so that consumers and business people are aware of the risks that oftentimes they're unaware of regarding lithium or coin type batteries. And we've done inspection visits, and we went to stores where they sell toys, and we confirm compliance in this regard. Apart from the campaigns and generating the order, we have had to inspect, and we find in the market, unfortunately, products that do not comply with the order that may pose a risk to the safety of kids. And we've taken administrative actions and put sanctions that get to 3.7 billion pesos or almost $900,000. And so it's not only sanctioning, but also educating consumers to prevent risk. And what has happened in some cases, we found that toys had a space in the batteries to put a screw, but the toy didn't have the screw. So this toy shouldn't be distributed, and we can solve the defect through a recall so that it would get the screw. So there were similar orders issued for recalls, and we also saw that in case of non-compliance, they were being marketed without the screw. So the order was to destroy the toy. Thank you. And I'm open to any question.
Muchísimas gracias, Daniel, por compartir la experiencia de la TIC con enfoque específicamente en esta población vulnerable que son los niños. Vamos a pasar ahora a la tercera panelista, que es la señora Rosa Morán, abogada titulada en Derecho por la Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú, especializada en Derecho Administrativo, con competencia profesional en representación internacional, innovación, desarrollo de proyectos y funciones de vocería institucional. Actualmente se desempeña como abogada, integrante del equipo de seguridad de productos de la Dirección de la Autoridad Nacional de Protección del Consumidor del INDECOPI, que se encuentra a cargo del Sistema de Alertas de Productos y Servicios Peligrosos peruanos. Además, representa al Perú en diversos grupos de trabajo nacionales e internacionales en materia de seguridad de productos y servicios. Rosa, te paso la palabra.
And Rosa, you have the floor. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Thank you for the invite.
Se ve perfecto.
Can you see my screen? Yes. The actions we've carried out in Peru from INDECOPI are related to consumer protection. However, just like in the case of Chile, there are other entities involved, particularly from the sector production and environment. Let me share the legal framework of how we approach this from INDECOPI. Our political constitution recognizes the rights of people to have a balanced environment and their livelihood, and the guarantee that the government should guarantee the right to information of consumers of the goods and services in the market and surveil for the safety and security of the population. And the Consumer Defense Code has a series of articles that in general promotes the free and sustainable consumption of products and following the regulation of environmental matters. We also see that in terms of labeling, our products are regulated according to the applicable regulation, but INDECOPI should guarantee that this is done appropriately. Another article indicates that there are obligations related to adopting immediate measures to mitigate the risk their products might have, and INDECOPI authorities should intervene in these cases. We have a regulation for this that provides a procedure to communicate these cases where we see risks on products that have entered the market. And additionally, there's regulation from the environmental sector regarding production and sustainable use, or in the case of labeling or technical standards on security. In this sense, the regulation is very diverse but articulated. There are multiple entities involved with the procedure of waste management of electronic and electric devices. From the Ministry of Environment, they promote adequate management of solid waste. The regulation comes from here. So activities came from the ministry and it affects all of the stakeholders. We also have a body of environmental supervision in charge of the operating part supervision and fiscalization of compliance with obligations manufacturers have of electric or electronic devices, or those that generate waste of electric or electronic devices. The assessments are extended regionally and locally through municipalities that are in charge of encouraging within their powers the waste collection of electric and electronic devices, and in the implementation of collection sites. This has been a generalized measure. The Ministry of Environment has a map that allows users to see where's the nearest collection point and therefore go and leave the waste. In addition, the regulation provides measures of promotion and obligations related to, for instance, in the case of manufacturers, distributors, marketers, and generators of waste, there are certain obligations to be implemented from the moment they put the product in the market, manufacturing, and after the use has been made and they become waste. And it promotes the participation of citizens and municipalities in the correct management of waste. INDECOPI includes three main obligations. One is product labeling. As I mentioned, is in charge of supervising labels to have the information that the sectorial standard provides. I will talk a little about this later. Also from the perspective of product safety, and it's related to what we're discussing today. Product alerts are published. We do recalls to put information that allows citizens to prevent risks that certain products may have that contain these batteries or the product itself. And then in terms of the promotion of sustainable consumption, and INDECOPI defines, there is no specific way how to do this activity, but It's more guiding as far as the consumer is concerned. Regarding the labeling of batteries, we're in charge of supervising the compliance with the technical standard for zinc and carbon batteries and their definitions, limits, or how this product needs to be labeled so that it's safe and secure to the consumer. And also in case of importation and the competent authorities to supervise it. From a technical perspective, our authority, which is the production ministry, and we see an additional authority here. There's labeling for the unit. Every battery should have specific information as well as the packaging, the brand of the product that allows consumers to have an idea of who brings the product to the market, expiration date, the polarity of the terminals, the voltage, and then in the packaging, there's additional information. Something that is important in looking at battery importation, the information should always be in Spanish, translated into Spanish, so that consumers can be appropriately informed. Actually, when customs detect products that don't have labeling in Spanish, this should be stopped and not enter the Peruvian market, or else seize it. In terms of sustainable consumption, we do promotion and some activities. For instance, this is a press release when we meet and do meetings with other authorities to promote sustainable consumption, including waste management of batteries. We've also launched these best practice guides so that small stores where products are sold in retail, but these suppliers don't get a lot of information. This manual has a specific chapter on recycling and how to manage waste. Regarding consumption alert systems, there's been some alerts. Briefly, our process, we detect the information, whether it is through suppliers, other sectorial authorities, and at our initiative, we do permanent monitoring of the recall portals internationally. After asking for information, this is managed, analyzed, and disseminated through the channels that we have, our alert panel, for example, social media, so that countries in the network can be informed. We've also implemented a follow-up stage so that after having published the alert, we ask the supplier how they're doing with recall and mitigation measures. And we see if any reinforcement is needed in the dissemination of information and any non-compliance. The supplier resorts to the authority for us to disseminate the information. However, in cases of non-compliance, they could resort to the legal level, and which may generate a sanction for the distributor or manufacturer. We have different means of dissemination. We have an alert portal, another one for the consumer, where we share the information, and through social media as well. We've seen some cases of products, for instance, these e-bikes that had batteries. It was a Croatian company that informed about the risk of flammability, and These are very costly products with limited units. However, the risk was high. This year, we've been providing a follow-up to this. It's important to improve the measures of communication the supplier has had to improve recalls. Last year, we also saw the smartwatches, Fitbit issues, batteries with the risk of overheating that may burn. And we've tried to have a connection with Facebook because we noticed that even though formal suppliers that distribute these watches already recalled the products from the stores, we've seen that individuals through marketplace, for example, distribute or sell these products directly to consumers, and it's more complicated to take them down. So this is something we still have to do. An older case, which was something that happened over the years with HP batteries with overheating risks. And just like in the case of Chile, there are very common alerts that we received on MacBook, Samsung, and speakers. And it's important to consider how a component or product that assists the functioning of another product can impact the product and affect consumers. Other than safety, I would like to mention a case we presented related to batteries and it has to do with programmed obsolescence. It's a case that is very controversial on iPhone Series 6 model, fairly old, but just so you see the magnitude in this case, that it's analyzed because of information. Programmed obsolescence is being discussed in terms of batteries and updates in the case of these cell phones in the operating system that may generate an impact to batteries. This is the only approach we have had, but it's something that is still in discussion. And regarding broadcast and consumer campaigns, we did a safety campaign, just like in Colombia, on small batteries. We shared videos to share the effects of swallowing a small battery. Also, the campaign that was unique has been replicated through recommendations in other campaigns we have periodically, mostly for toys for kids. And this is for Safe Christmas. And final thoughts, let me say the work in the copy is preventive, but there's a follow-up also to see if there's non-compliance regarding safety obligations. And there's a permanent commitment to share information with sustainable consumption, and in this way to help in the promotion of environmental regulation so that the protection of consumers related to batteries and in general involves multiple entities of something we call the National Integrated System of Consumer Protection. Thank you for your attention.
Muchísimas gracias, Rosa, por compartir
Thank you, Rosa,
estas iniciativas del INDECOPI.
for sharing in the
Quisiera
COPE
aprovechar la ocasión
initiatives.
para recordar
Let
que
me
pueden acceder a
remind you
más
all
información
that you
sobre las
can have
alertas de
access
productos
to
a través
more
de la plataforma
information
CIAR,
through
que es
the
el
CR
sistema de alertas
platform,
de la
which
red.
is
Y
our
para
alert system in the
terminar, quisiera
network.
pasar la
And to wrap
palabra
up, let
a
me give the
Benjamin
floor
para
to
sus
Ben
observaciones finales.
for his final remarks.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Before we do our closing, I hope I'm not going to carry this on too long, but I want to see if we can have everyone turn on the cameras. There was a humble request that we're able to get a picture of everyone right before we do the closing. So I humbly request that you turn on your cameras so we can be able to see your face and get a quick image before we close out. We'll give it one more second and make sure everyone's able to get a picture. All right.
To the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, everyone. All right. So in closing, I would like to thank Darren Conlon, Daniela Para, Dr. Andres Prada Garcia, Rosa Moran Soyon, and our other moderator, Maria Paula Rubin. All of them have helped me out. And also, I'd like to quickly thank the staff over at the Organization of American States, who have really facilitated this webinar and made it great. So in closing, we encourage the audience to reach out to either the staff here at OAS or a TIC Council with me, and let us know if you're interested in more of these types of webinars. We can tackle different topics and focus on different safety and sustainability concerns. To learn more about the Organization of American States Department of Social Inclusion or Consumer Safety Health Network, visit www.oas.org. And then for a TIC Council, please visit TIC-Council, that'd be COUNCIL.org. With that, I would like to close and thank everyone for being able to attend today, and have a great rest of your day.
Gracias a todos.
Thanks,